June 1940. With the forces of Hitler's Germany poised, ready to invade, Britain turned to the pilots of RAF Fighter Command to save them from a future as Nazi slaves.
You looked, and your absolute stomach was in a knot.
They were just hell-bent on kill, kill, kill.
We never said teleho, none of us. We would use one simple word. We attack.
For the fighting few, the battle to deny Hitler mastery of the skies over England was about to begin. Britain's traditional barrier against invasion, the English Channel, had halted Germany's increasing advance across Europe. Hitler was threatening to send his air fleets to clear the skies of the RAF and pave the way for his vulnerable troop barges to land on the coast of England. Goering, Hitler's air minister and commander-in-chief of the Luftwaffe, had promised Hitler he would destroy the RAF and gain complete superiority of the air over southern England. To achieve this aim, he had a fleet of over 2,500 aircraft at his disposal. To face this assault, the RAF had only 750 fighters. In spite of the odds, the British pilots were relentlessly confident as the people of Britain readied themselves to meet this threat.
We were going to win this war. We certainly weren't going to be beaten. And everybody got into the swing of it. The government pressed all the bells and buttons they could, stepping up production of everything under the sun. All prominent buildings were being sandbagged. Everybody was digging slit trenches or putting up Anderson shelters. It was a tremendous period. The whole country was mobilized almost overnight.
Most young people in the squadron were almost looking forward to war. It may seem a dreadful thing to say now, but the thought of being flying full-time and being involved in a war was much more exciting than being an electrical engineering apprentice at Unilever Limited.
The job of defense would fall to the pilots of Fighter Command. But with the loss of 300 of its flyers during the fighting in France, the most pressing problem was the lack of experienced pilots. Its call for qualified volunteers brought young men from the farthest reaches of the British Commonwealth.
I saw an ad in the newspapers in the early 1940. RAF wants qualified pilots. I'm an adventurous type by nature, and I wanted to go out, and I wanted to see the world, and I wanted to fly. That was my main, really, reason. I didn't know much about Hitler or his politics. I knew he was a bad man, and it would be good for us if we fight against him.
Other Commonwealth pilots had entered the RAF before the outbreak of war.
I went over to England in 1935 with the objective of taking the entrance exams to the RAF College at Scramble, which I did later that year, and then came home again thinking I'd failed, and then got a got a telegram to say that no, I had been accepted. So I got in the boat and came back again.
Some who fought with the RAF came from countries not yet at war with Germany.
It was while I was at the University of Texas that I became aware of the dreadful things that were happening in Europe. One had this hatred of fascism, and I chose Britain because Britain was the one country that was standing up against it and fighting. Of course, what I really wanted to do was to join the Royal Air Force. But it would have been very difficult for me to get to Britain. So I knew that the Canadian Air Force was part of the Royal Air Force and that their pilots were flying in Britain. That seemed to be the best way for me to do.
But for others who joined, their service with the RAF was the continuation of a bitter, hard-fought battle. Many Polish pilots had already faced the Nazi invader. Flying obsolete aircraft against overwhelming odds, many had escaped to Britain as their homeland was overrun by the Nazis.
When the invasion happened, it was a disaster for the whole country. Within the first 4 days, you see, it was obvious. They were just moving and rolling their armor, and the German Air Force going in advance, bombing and softening the targets. We were overwhelmed by the power of the Luftwaffe, and we suffered heavy losses, and we had to withdraw east.
When we were there was we knew that the General Sikorski was in England already, and we were making arrangements for the Polish Air Force because we realized that was the only chance now to continue the fight.
These pilots from overseas, who were to make up 20% of fighter command strength, were given an appreciative welcome.
I was treated as a VIP wherever I went, with a turban and a wing on my turban and another RAF wing on my breast pocket. They would stop and talk to me, and if I went to the restaurant, they would give me whatever I want in spite of the rations.
We all went to the Polish Air Force base in Blackpool. All Blackpool was taken over by Poles, everywhere. All boarding houses, hotels, everything. There were Poles everywhere.
For me, it was very surprising because the people treated us extremely well. People when you see it with Poland on your arm, they were so kind and willing. Everybody wanted to buy you a drink.
While the combat-experienced pilots from the occupied countries of Eastern Europe would have no problems taking on the German Air Force in battle, taking on the English language was another thing entirely.
Nobody spoke English. And so we struggled with this, and we found out that you could pronounce THE in about 10 different ways.
The language barrier was at the beginning just to learn the basic command word. You see, once you learn the command word, with that command vocabulary, you wouldn't be able to make a conversation. But you know kill, you know attack, and I'm a bandit, because that was a jargon used during that fight during the war. Then they learn very quickly.
There was a lot of girls, and they were helping us with our English, which was very kind of them. As a matter of fact, I corresponded with one. I asked her, I said to her, I will write to you in my broken English, how bad it is. Will you send my letter back and with your corrections? You see, it will help me to learn. And one of those girls was corresponding with me in that way for several months.
We already learned the English way of saluting with the full hand, because in Poland we have only 2 fingers. They said, don't fingers, because it's a very rude gesture, you mustn't do it.
But now all these pilots were to learn how to handle a new breed of single-engine fighter aircraft. For them, as with the new British pilots, the first sight of these powerful machines was a moment to remember.
I saw my first Spitfire, and I was so impressed with it, because in appearance, you couldn't have a more beautiful machine than the Spitfire.
You fell in love with Spitfire the moment you see it. It's just like a beautiful woman with all the assets.
The Spitfire aircraft was a marvellous aeroplane to fly. You had to be careful on the ground because you had such a narrow undercarriage and it tended to be nose heavy. But once you got the aircraft into the air, it was a wonderful aircraft to fly.
Quite frankly, it was such a fine aircraft that having got airborne, as long as there was nothing foolish done, the aircraft just seemed to fly away and take you with it.
It was such a wonderful machine to fly because it was so sensitive to its controls. You could turn, slip, side slip, do all of the things that you had to do in combat so easily.
The Spitfire was to capture the imagination, but it was the less glamorous Hurricane that provided the greater part of fighter command strength.
I would prefer fighting a war in a Hurricane than a Spitfire. Hurricanes was an aircraft which you could play with. I saved my life many times just because of the maneuverability of that aircraft.
The Hurricane was a superb combat aircraft, actually. It was a better gun platform than the Spitfire. And it was a rugged aeroplane, it was a very good aircraft. But of course the Spitfire had the edge on performance.
It seemed somehow as though you fitted into a Spitfire rather more than you did a Hurricane. On the other hand, the Hurricane you trusted, it was a good old workhorse, it would take an awful lot of punishment, and you had faith in the aircraft.
In fact, that's the only advantage I say of the Hurricane. It'd take punishment. Otherwise, the Spitfire wins hands down.
I did more flying in Spitfire than Hurricane, but as a fighting machine, I prefer the Hurricane.
Both of these fighters generated fierce loyalty among their pilots, who swiftly determined their abilities, but also re-engineered them to give them more of a fighting chance over the opponents.
The Hurricane was pop-riveted, all these little buttons sticking up all over. And I reckon if I file the heads down a bit and flatten them somewhat, not too much or they'd all come out, but flatten them a bit, I'd get a bit of extra speed. I reckon I got about an extra 5 miles an hour out of the aircraft, but the rigger and I would sit on the wing, on the ground, with the filing rivet heads.
But there were other, less glamorous aircraft which were not so well thought of, such as the obsolete, slow and clumsy twin-engine Bristol Blenheim, an unfortunate and unloved aircraft.
A Blenheim were dreadfully cold. There was a howling gale used to come in. If you got any height, you see, I mean, the temperature outside was about, I don't know, minus 50, minus 60. And it was just, all we had was a pretty thin metal skinned aircraft, and drafty at that, but bitterly cold.
When the Blenheim sort of was thrown about by the pilot, it certainly, you know, a bit sickening, you know, when you weren't experiencing it before. You know, the turrets generally, there wasn't a great deal of room. The only thing was, as you elevated the guns, and you had to mind that the back end of the gun didn't hit you in the face.
North Wheel was bombed, and quite apart from all the buildings which had been destroyed, include a lot of 25 Squadron's Blenheims, and they would only too glad to see the back end of them. But
There is no doubting that the Hurricane and Spitfire were beautiful machines, but the pilots that flew them would need all their courage and determination to overcome the vast Luftwaffe fleet. In August 1940, in the midst of the Battle of Britain, the Germans stepped up the ferocity of their raids. Britain's more experienced pilots had learned how to fight and survive. But newly trained pilots who were thrown into the battle had to learn quickly or die trying.
when the war started, I was 23, which by comparison with the pilots in Battle of Britain, I was an old man. There are chaps of 18 there who were flying and dying.
These chaps would come in and they'd sit down. They'd probably only done 7 hours on Spitfires, if that. And they watched us taking off everything we got and coming back 2 pilots short. Their nerves must have been shot to blazes. I don't know how they coped.
Of course, you took the new boys under your wing. I had one who was flying number 2 to me, and I said, right, you just hang on to my tail and watch what goes on. And my horror, I had that second sight one gets when you suddenly feel somebody is looking at you. I glanced up in the mirror. Between me and my number 2 was the biggest and fattest 109 I'd ever seen in my life. And as I looked, his whole front end lit up. So I sort of pulled and pushed everything in panic and got out of his way. And my number 2 was trailing behind. And I thought, oh, he's a good lad. He should have warned me about this 109. In fact, he should have shot at it. But anyhow, he's cutting the corner, and he'll join up very quickly by cutting the corner. And the next thing, he started firing at me. I rang him up on the radio and told him to desist, but I was quite friendly, actually, until we got on the ground, and I berated him somewhat, which was a great blow to his morale, but anyhow, I think he learnt to shoot straight from then on, because he should have just shot me straight out of the sky, after all.
As the pilots of Fighter Command stood ready to take to the air day after day, the demands of combat became a deadly routine.
The squadron might be on readiness for 2 or 3 hours or longer. And that meant that during all that time, you were there and you were ready to take off.
We used to be sitting, listening to the music in the tents or huts, whichever were there.
Then when the word came to scramble, you'd all rush to your aircraft.
We were always fully dressed, and all what we had to do is to run as fast as we could to the dispersal point of the aeroplanes, jump into the aircraft. There were 2 airmen always on either side of the aircraft. They would strap us, and we had to be airborne within a minute. My record is 20 seconds.
The squadron of 12 aircraft was scrambled in an easterly direction, and a few of the serviceable aircraft and the less experienced pilots, including myself, were left behind, when suddenly an order came through, scramble all aircraft. As I ran out, I looked up, and there was a German formation overhead, bombs coming down. But I got off before the dust began to clear. However, I lost sight of them in the clouds and haze, and I didn't see them, and I'm not sure what I would have done if I had.
I don't think we were brave. It was just a matter of we were doing something that we felt we'd got to do, type of thing. When you were going out and you'd suddenly hear that the Huns, the enemy, well, it's the Angel, so and so, and you looked, and your absolute stomach was in a knot.
Lanyard leader calling. Tally-ho.
But once you start firing or taking evasive action, it seems to settle you down. You're doing something definite, you see.
It's being in battle. You have a mixture of emotions. If you are attacking, then you're elated, you're excited, you're feeling good. If you are being jumped upon, that's a different story. You are looking after number one.
The first time I'd fired a Spitfire's guns. We intercepted a Heinkel 111. I'd been told, if in doubt, aim to miss in front, which I did. I turned in and made an attack which went in fairly close, closer than I had intended because I was flying a bit too fast. Return fire from the aircraft put a few holes in my left wing and sent one right through the hood, actually, of my cockpit. And then I pulled away and found out later that the Heinkel had crashed.
But in between the action, the aircraft had to be serviced and repaired, and had to be kept ready to fight at all costs. This task was performed by an army of ground crew.
They were absolutely marvelous because they knew the aircraft so well, and they helped us scramble in the least possible time, you know, helping with parachute and harness and so forth. And of course they were very good and quick in rearming the aircraft. They were wonderful chaps.
I was a keen amateur photographer, and that was my ambition, to join the Royal Air Force as a photographer. Oh, well, we don't want photographers now, we want some other people, and these are the trades that are open to you, rigger, fitter, and so forth and so on. So I said, all right, well, I'll be a rigger if I can, and signed up for that.
I trained up there as an armourer. They teach you up there everything. You don't have to remember anything about your marching orders or square bashing, as they used to call it. You're now in classes learning about bombs, components, bullets, pyrotechnics, everything. And then you carry on, and then you have to take a big test there. You pass out with flying colours if you're any good. If not, you get sent elsewhere. But by a bit of luck, I was brainy and I passed out with flying colours.
You took the panels off and checked everything, and there was the electricians, the armourers, and you was all milling about the machine, and you had what they call a Form 700, which you went through, like you checked everything, and if there was anything that you found, you'd tell the engineering officer, and the thing would go in the hangar, and the fitters in the hangar then would see to it.
To be a rigger, you're taught how to sew a button on a shirt, for instance, and how to do metalwork. The training was very, very clear and precise.
Armoury consists of fusing bombs, loading on aircraft, cleaning guns, mending guns, looking after all the ammunition. To me, handling explosives was no more than handling fireworks.
Those gentlemen were out of this world. When I landed for each sortie, they used to get on the wing and take my straps off for me and help me out of the cockpit. And they always seemed more interested in what had happened than anyone else. And they were wonderful. I couldn't have coped without them. Let's face it, none of us could.
Ground crew were vital to us, and they were stupendous because, OK, they weren't very busy whilst we were airborne, but when we got back, all hell broke loose. They were busy working on the aircraft, patching them up if necessary. Of course, very often through the nights, doing servicing. And I used to get a case of beer from the bar and take it up to the lads and sit on the crate whilst they drank the beer and just tell them what went on and find out how they were coping and so on.
If there was anyone about, of course, you called him Sir, which... but apart from that, there was just kind of mates. That's all there was to it. When there was on the ground, waiting for when was what they called on readiness, they'd sit around in chairs. They'd either play football with you or cricket with you, or they'd laugh with you, they'd joke with you. They were just mates. Well, I think they realised, in a way, that their life was in our hands.
In that long summer of fierce fighting, the lives of the pilots and ground crew revolved around the squadron and its airfield. It was here they would seek out rare opportunities to enjoy life before once again seeking out death. During the Battle of Britain, the pilots of Fighter Command would be engaged in savage aerial fighting one moment and then back at their bases in the English countryside the next. Fleeting moments of calm away from battle were to be savoured by the fatigued fighter pilots.
If you stay in the mess, you could play snooker, you could drink in the bar. The station commander played violin, and he would go with his violin to ladies' room, which was hardly ever used, a smallish room. He would have a bottle of scotch on the table, several glasses, and he would start playing. People would hear the music, and they would look into ladies' room, and he would do that, and very soon there was a party.
Really, it was a very jovial kind of atmosphere that we made the most of and thought we were entitled to because of what the dangers we were putting up with.
There was Orchard Hotel in Uxbridge, and the proprietor, he was like a father to us. And my pay was £15 a month. Usually by the middle of month, broke. And if you went to Orchard with about a shilling and you could afford half a pint of beer, you made it last. And when the proprietor saw that you were in that sort of, had that sort of problem, he would send you a pint of beer. You see, he was that sort of chap. Very, very nice.
We lived it up in those days. Oh, just drinking and girls and things, you know, flirting. Yeah, flirting.
Once a week in the gymnasium, all rank dance. And that was great fun because station commander would ask his beautiful wife to lead the samba, and all the rest of the people were behind. So there were hundreds of people zooming around, you know, weaving around the gym. There were a couple of girls which I met, and when I was in hospital, they came to see me. And the nurses in Hillington Hospital didn't like that, and they told them they have only 5 minutes. I wasn't dying, I was all right, the operation was over. So I told her that this is not on, really, why shouldn't they stay longer? I said, besides, I'm engaged to both of them, so they can't depart so soon.
As they played hard and fought hard, there was little personal hatred for the enemy. But for one group of pilots, the war was personal. An opportunity to take revenge on the hated Nazis, even if it meant ignoring official procedures.
The big thing was radio silence. You didn't open your mouth unless you saw something that was going to attack you or you saw something in the distance. When the Polish squadrons came in, they wouldn't stop chattering, and they caused quite a bit of chaos from time to time.
You had to think about the proper word in English, but you didn't. Now, if you wanted to say, look out, Jerry on your tail. Now, if you start thinking how to compose that sentence, it takes time. So it was easier to say it in Polish because you could say it instantly. And that was not very popular with the RAF chaps. They sometimes would say, shut up, Poles.
They said at the time that they were a menace, I think was the word they used, because they wanted to fight their own war and their own battles.
There was a lot of patriotic feeling. I was fighting for Poland. I think we really lost so badly in Poland, and we have to go back to Poland, and we have to have a revenge as soon as possible on the Jerry.
There was this Messerschmitt 109 shot down with a young pilot. He was thrown in by the station people into jail, and two new Polish pilots who had joined us, who really hated the Hun, went over to see him, and it was, I never saw this happen, but I was told one of them had spat at the German pilot in hate.
They had so much hatred in their hearts, so much. All they wanted to do, and they were just hell-bent on kill, kill, kill.
Actually, we had reasons to be to dislike Airmen and Germans, and if there was an opportunity to do them any harm, nobody hesitated. This is how it was.
They were not exactly bilingual, so it was rather difficult to handle them, and I think the controllers were inclined not to use them if they could help it, because the fact that they weren't sure they would understand the orders that were given to them. One day when everything was in the air, we had nothing else to put up at all. Next thing you heard was, we are up, show us the Hun. And they had taken off on their own, and they were up there getting ready to go. So they gave them back to us, hopefully that they got them, but they did a good job, and they never looked back. They were used after that a great deal and did a wonderful job.
We never said tally-ho, none of us. We would use one simple word. We attack.
They were quick to shoot. Sometimes they didn't wait for the order, and of course the squadron leader, when he gave an order to turn left, everybody has to turn left. And sometimes suddenly somebody said, oh, there is the enemy, and just veer off and try to fight his war by himself.
There was no question of trying to keep with your leader. You look after yourself. And it happened so quickly. And I was successful. So then I thought, well, my God, that is the way I'm going to win the war.
It's difficult to take a wholesale view that every Pole was particularly aggressive and all that. It isn't like that. In any group of men, you have different types. You have people who are born killers, who enjoy killing, and who are often a nuisance in the formation. They are after individual success. There are also other people who are observers, simply. And they will fight when they are attacked, but they are not particularly keen on exposing themselves by peeling off from the formation.
In the Battle of Britain, Polish fighters were the highest scored pilots during that time. Having only 2 squadrons taking part in the Battle of Britain, were visible with the number of kills.
The 303 Squadron was the most successful squadron in the Battle of Britain. Their score is the highest for the period they were there. I'm not praising them for any other reason, except that they deserve it. They did very well.
Towards the end of August 1940, the success of the Polish pilots helped the overall swing of the battle to the British.
The Germans must have been frustrated
in the extreme. They must have said to one another, where the hell do they keep coming from? And of course we'd got them taped. But we were relatively few, but well organised.
But despite the successes, the number of pilots lost through death or injury meant that Fighter Command's ability to put up a fight hung dangerously on a knife edge. During the latter part of the Battle of Britain, every day the pilots were reminded of the fragile line between life and death when aircraft and pilot failed to return from engagements.
I consider myself very lucky to be alive today. Among the 8 Indian fighter pilots, 6 were killed.
We had a new Blenheim being delivered to the squadron, and it crashed and it set fire, and we ran to the scene, and they'd fetched the pilot out, but he was badly burnt, and his hot face slapped against mine, and it was one of the things that might have put me off flying for the rest of the war, you know, having that experience.
For many pilots during the Battle of Britain, however skilled, luck was on their side.
I turned the aircraft over, pulled my straps, I was dropping out, looking at my toes up in the air there, coming over, and I remember thinking, you've got to count something before you pull the ripcord. I didn't even know where the ripcord was. I had never even touched a ripcord. But I remember panicking as to where it was, and I got it, and I threw it, and it went straight off in the air. I thought, oh my God, I've broken it. And my hands went to my backside to try to release things when I suddenly found that little tug of the pilot chute come out. And the other thing was my flight commander was shot in the foot by the Home Guard. And this worried me, so for the last few hundred feet I was yelling out, British, British, British.
The bailout itself was normal, but the thing was I tore the parachute. I think I might have been knocked out, I'm not sure about that, but all I know is when I looked up to the parachute, the 3 canopies completely had gone, and the perimeter shroud had been cut so that it was held by one single strand of silk. And if that silk gave way, then the whole parachute would have collapsed. I think, although nothing happened, I think it was the most, shall we say, terrifying, if you like, few moments I've had until that parachute landed on the ground.
I was shot down during the Battle of Britain. I came out of cloud for 18,000 feet underneath 51 9s. They hit me from in front and behind at the same time. How they did that without crashing into each other, I do not know. I never will know. But I can prove that it happened because I had a bullet through my shoulder from the front. Had a cannon shell came in from behind and exploded on my parachute that I was sitting on. Put a lump through my foot which split my Achilles tendon, so I had minus right leg. A bullet came through the armour piercing behind and went through my watch, which annoyed me, into my hand, left hand. And that was my first experience of the nasty side of war.
The engine was dead. Dead silence. Engine had stopped. Had it been high enough, I think I would have bailed out. But at 800 feet, and by the time I'd done a quick search, I was obviously too low. I was over the industrial area. All that was below were churches, schools, terrace houses, pylons, factories, canal. In fact, absolutely not a yard that you could put down on. And the only thing left to me was to go behind a row of terrace houses where they each had a little cabbage patch of about 10 or 15 yards. And I thought, well, I might be able to put it down there. But it had to be very, very accurate flying to get it onto the right spot. There was two very large oak trees on the right-hand side. The starboard wing caught one of these and snapped off immediately. That pushed my port wing into the ground. That snapped off. That swung me into the house. It knocked a hole into the house and left the engine pretty well on the kitchen table. The fuselage then skidded aloft through the Brussels sprouts and demolished a garden shed and struck a concrete post, and that spun me round, leaving me just almost on the seat that I'd sat in. And had I not have put the seat down low and strapped myself in hard, then the first time that wing caught the oak tree, I would imagine I'd have smashed my face. But as it was, it skidded across the ground, and although, yes, I was bruised and a bit of blood flying around, but in relative terms, I was unhurt.
During the summer and autumn months of 1940, the Luftwaffe attempted to annihilate the RAF and destroy Britain's will to fight. They were beaten back on both counts. For the first time, the Nazi military machine had failed in its attempt to subdue an adversary. Although there would be 5 more long years of fighting before the defeat of Germany, Fighter Command had gained the first substantial victory and ensured that Britain would survive to fight on.
It was a battle that altered the course of history. Those brave chaps who gave their lives for the battle deserve to be remembered because that battle was so significant.
I think it was vital to this country being able to continue the war. If we hadn't won that, I think we'd have been in serious trouble.
When you look at those figures, it is incredible that so few did have such an effect on so many.
I was very, very proud to have been taking part in what was going on in 1940 over this country. And I suppose all these wonderful people died. Some of them were wonderful aces and were killed. And I had some wonderful friends who were killed. And I feel that now I'm getting, sort of say, some publicity or credibility which really belongs to them. And I say, so it's, I like it. It's obviously, everyone likes, but getting old, getting a bit of sort of publicity. But really, all I am is representing those who died.
It was a golden opportunity for people like myself to get involved in something pretty well worthwhile. We were uniquely privileged, really. I mean, to be given one of our very few fighter airplanes to take up and try and do some good with it, and then get the thing back on the ground all in one piece. It was a privilege, no doubt about that.
I feel enormously privileged in the sense that I feel, I suppose, as same as the chaps who took part at Trafalgar or Crecy or Agincourt or Battle of Waterloo. We happened to be the right age, the right place, the right time.
It had a tremendous effect on me because when I went into that, because of my background, I was immature, scared, afraid to say boot or goose. I was just a nobody, and it was obvious to me. I was made to feel that in a way. But after the Battle of Britain, I could make decisions on anything. I could do anything and was afraid of nothing.
It took more than individual courage and bravery to win the Battle of Britain. Behind the fighting few, there was a complex command and control system guiding them, ground crew supporting them, and a nation behind them. But without the stubborn courage of the fighter command pilot, strapped in his cockpit, confronting the fleets of enemy fighters and bombers, the system would have been broken, the support destroyed, and the nation laid low. Against a seemingly invincible enemy, the few of fighter command had won a great and decisive victory.
Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few.